And we are live. Welcome to Square Work Media's World this evening on this Saturday night. I'm your host, Square. It's Saturday, July 27th, 2024, the year of our Lord. And let's get into it, shall we? Oh, yeah. Hmm. Here's the thing, though. Oh, that's so cute. That's so cute. Here's the thing, though. Those comments or whatever, they won't lead back to this fucking account or my actual main account. You know. So apparently, like, they're going around law and crime using my name and making comment. That's okay. That's all right. If anybody ever, like, if you say anything too stupid or see, that's the thing. Even if I you know, perhaps say lose a video, right? Because maybe something I didn't know would get hit on the stream or whatever. And earlier in that stream, you threatened something like that. Well, you may think, well, it's gone, he ain't got it. And if he's got a screenshot, I can argue screenshot's fake. But I remember I pointed that out here a while back. True evidence would be a video. And even those can be altered in some ways. But as long as you're doing it, for yourself and you're doing it clean, you're not editing or trying to mess with nothing, then what I have is clean recordings every time I go online and do what I want to do, which is wholesome activity. So, and any threats or stuff like that that come up, like, I mean, if a group has a guy named Ford, and Ford, guess what? I've got all your text messages of you threatening death, threatening to assault, beat me up, all this shit. And you might think that I delete, but you've been sending it from the same number. And at the very beginning of those messages, you know, you could say, "Oh, it wasn't me, it was somebody else." Well, I mean, that's the thing. Y'all think nothing's ever gonna happen, but I mean, hell, keep thinking that. I mean, it doesn't seem like you're gonna change anyway. Hello, Chi Chi. Hello, pit bulls. Law and crime and Ewu. Sometimes I do leave comments, but been probably a good while. And if the comment's not left by, like, if you can't click on a comment profile and it don't come to my page, my real page, which I only have two, I only ever have two active. So all you people, anyone new in here, need to remember, I only ever have two pages. This one that we're on and my main one. The only exception to that would be if something happened to one of these. I may have one of them. But just know, if I don't just have one, I only got more than two. And you can tell when it's mine or not. I've done some editing here lately, and obviously you can tell it's me because it's got the most subscribers and all that. This one has like 160 or something, but the difference is this one's, well, I'm not going to go over that, but there's some differences. Let's just put it that way. There's differences that point that out. So I don't give a shit about that. All right. So tonight, guys, we have something. Oh, and I messaged you, Pitbull. Oh, hello there, Nathan. Thanks for coming in. Now, everybody can see the mole. It's an alt. It's stock. All right. They've had a wrench. They don't have a wrench anymore. And they knew they didn't when they came in here. And you might be saying, how do you know that? How do you know that? Just trust me. I know. I was made aware very early on today. But let's just put it this way. Our friend, our what we thought friend Nathan is a supporter of the guy that came here and doxed my house live and everything. So yeah, you might come in here and you might be a mole and you might get wrenched. but you won't stay hidden long. That is why, and that's a clear example right there, why that if anyone joins my Discord, like I said, I'm I've got people saying it's a scam to get information. Why would I get information from just random people to dox? You know, unless they were to join somebody and start doing the shit that's been done to me, like, and even then, the policy now is not worry about that. Like, I've thought long and hard on it, and so uh, besides from the people that is already known as like Mustard and them, if someone else new comes along and if you learn their information, keep it, hold on to it, do not put it out. The temptation to want to put it out, I get it. I mean, I do, especially when you've been wrong, but don't do it. Don't even do it for an educational purpose. Like, I've never told somebody, this is so and so, go blah 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 blah. Like, I've never done that. I just say this is so and so, and they're the ones that did this X, Y, and Z. Beware of them. That's how I've always done it. But people are going to still call it doxing, so just don't even do it. Just keep it for the police, what have you. If they go after someone else, you might want to, not share it with that person unless you know they're not going to put it out. I mean, that's ultimately the way you respond when someone does stuff like that. That's what you should do, at least. It's what I should have done. Um, but, here again, I wasn't well versed, back then in YouTube and learning the ropes to these algorithm. People like call them communities. I call it just algorithm. Like, there's an algorithm for guns. There's an algorithm for this. It's not community. If it was communities, there'd be a community section on YouTube where you go to communities and then go down to click on troll groups. I mean, I wish it was like that, because then you could leave communities and then people would have to follow you, which would, seem like stalking. But there's that. I mean, there is communities and there isn't. You get what I'm saying? All right. So let's get into. So tonight, what I was gonna do is, there's a channel called The Vile Eye, and we've watched the Sopranos one. He does these amazing breakdowns on characters from favorite shows, movies, yours and mine. And there might be someone in here that the particular analog, they don't care for the particular movie or character. I'm sorry if that's the case. If you have a better one or one that you'd like us to cover here, you can always leave it down in the comments, and I'll be happy to play it after I do the one that I've got planned. So we're going to be looking at two shows. One is a quick claymation show that used to run on, I believe, Adult Swim. And there's another one, and the other one is one of my all-time favorites, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul character that we're going to analyze. But the first one is Clay Puppington. And who Clay Puppington is he's Moral Oral's father. And if you don't know who Moral Oral is, you can Google Moral Oral. It was a clay animation style show that appeared on Adult Swim, around when Family Guy, Robot Chicken, Aqua Teen, stuff like that came on. I didn't actually catch it. I remember now, once I saw it here a while back, and I finally got into it. Like, I remembered, yeah, I remember seeing that when I was younger, but I just never got into it. I didn't really care for that claymation style of, I don't know why. I just didn't really. Shows that were done in claymation, they weren't popular to me when I was younger. See this little toolbar right here? Yeah, that's the screen recorder. And that doesn't get saved to my device because it would eat up my device, storage. That automatically gets, I can pause it, like right here, and then I can resume recording. And so that records everything. Anything that happens, anything that gets said. And I've been doing that for a while, since about, well, why should I tell you? All right. So moving on, let's get started for our content for tonight. Everyone, thanks for coming. I will have, now see, I'm going to be stepping out to smoke here, guys. And when I step out, I try to tell you guys so you know that, well, actually, while I'm outside, I can still see your comments and respond to them. And I want y'all to know that from now on, I'm going to be making sure that I have a device out that has the comments being shown, whether I'm here or there, outside, inside, doesn't matter. That way, if there's an audio issue, I can get to it quicker and we can avoid little mishaps like that. Because I know that can sometimes like dampen and ruin the viewing experience, and I don't want to do that. So, without further ado, I present to you the Vile Eye, Analyzing Evil, Clay Puppington. All right, let's get started.
Hello everyone. Before we get into the video, I'd like to discuss something. You might have noticed already, but what you're hearing isn't the typical Vile Eye voice you're used to. Well, that's because I'd like to do a little experimentation with this video. Now obviously quite a lot of you enjoy the voice I use in these videos, but there's more than a few people who have made comments over the years saying that the way I narrate these videos isn't their cup of tea. Now, the reason I decided to speak the way I do on this channel is because I always figured that darker subject matter deserves a darker tone, and I still believe that. However, I've always thought that my videos are successful because of the way they're written, not the way they're spoken. And with that in mind, I've decided to use this video to see which side of me you'd prefer to hear going forward, the real me or the vile voice that you've all come to know and mostly love. So, throughout this episode, you're going to be hearing my regular speaking voice, and I want you to tell me down below if you prefer this or what I've been doing. A few days from now, I'll put up a poll in a community post to get a more concrete answer. If it turns out that you all prefer the voice I've been using, I'll make sure that it's the one you hear in every video going forward. But if not, this could be the new voice of the eye, and perhaps that's for the best. With that out of the way, I'd like to welcome you all to the 131st episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Clay Puppington from Moral Oral. Clay is a horrific example of what wrong can come from people who believe they're doing good. A man who's molded into a monster by the shoddy and corrupted values of a society that believes wholeheartedly in its own righteousness, one that corrupts all who it touches with its poisonous and backwards moral structure. In this video,
he is stepping outside and making his people fucking watch this. Fuck yeah, witch. Jesus, god damn, it's horrible.
Family and a small town.
What the actual fuck?
Around him, including himself. But first,
Oh
let's
yeah.
talk about our sponsor.
Oh fuck yeah.
Dave. I've actually used Dave.
What up, Z? What up, Witch? What up, everybody?
They even helped me when I needed a new battery for my car a couple years ago, and I'm happy to spread the word about what they have to offer. Dave is a banking app that
I turned that shit down because I don't want to fucking listen to it and get struck for some gay shit.
No interest, late fees, or credit check required to get the help you need.
Oh.
We've all been in a position where we need a little extra cash, and if you're dealing with an unexpected expense, that can make matters even worse. And it's invaluable having an asset that can get you the help you need without breaking the bank. To see what Dave can do to help you in your time of need, download Dave today at dave.com/file. That's dave.com/file to sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Thank you, Dave, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Now, we can't talk about Clay Puppington without first discussing his hometown, Moralton, which is conveniently placed in the exact center of the United States, with a church at its center. Morrilton is a bastion of every negative stereotype of 1950s small-town middle America. And considering Morrilton is supposedly in the exact geographical center of the United States, Middle America couldn't be a more fitting term to use to describe it. Of course, the main stereotype that plagues Morrilton are the values of evangelical Protestantism that dictates all laws, entertainment, culture, and trade goods. The education system is based on faith, with science classes used as a vehicle for the reinforcement of ideas like dinosaur bones being used by God to grow dinosaurs, and the Earth being only a few thousand years old. And the police in town are more concerned with protecting the status quo than they are with fighting crime or helping people. Nudity and swearing are more cause for concern than murder and drug use are, and beating one's children is considered a virtuous act that steers the pious children of Morrilton towards God. Entertainment is entirely relegated to what people widely had access to in the 1950s, namely radios, turntables, toys, and the occasional pinball machine. Though it's implied by the stock of Stephanie's store, Berry Pleasures, that other forms of media are available if one should wish to consume them. With access to such a wide variety of media outlets, the people of Morrilton spend their time listening to songs on the radio with lyrics like, "Reason is the enemy of faith, my friend. A head that's filled with knowledge soon is too bloated with its own weight." At home, children can listen to classics on vinyl, like Turn the Other Cheek, a song that uses the slapping of a woman as an instrument, and implores them to turn the other cheek and show the world how strong they are by simply acting weak, so that of course they, as the meek, can inherit the earth one day. Children play exclusively with Bible-inspired toys, like the Super God action figure, and Super God has even given his own pinball machine in Forgetty's Pub, if any pious drinkers need a bit of fun to go with their beer. Nearly everyone of note in Morrilton dresses in formal, or at the very least casual formal clothing, and one can't step more than 3 feet without encountering some sort of reference to God. Now, why they choose to model their society around this time period likely comes down to their attitude that this was the peak of civilization, a time when God was providing modern comforts and an expansion of man's dominion over nature, and more importantly, a time when the flow of information could be more easily monitored and regulated. Without television or the internet, controlling the flow of information to the youth becomes a much easier task, and they can easily ban anything that runs counterintuitive to their beliefs, shunning anything created after their chosen time period as nothing more than sinful drivel. Ignorance is bliss may as well be the town motto of Morrilton, and is taken to such a severe degree that even when tragedy strikes, the people of Morrilton are nearly always more concerned with offending God than they are with their own safety or the safety of others. Like when the town is overrun by zombies, and the fact that these zombies are naked is more cause for concern than the zombies themselves. But the harm that their willful ignorance causes them is perhaps most prevalent in the way they take care of their bodies. Chemicals and pills are used in lieu of any kind of accurate medical diagnosis. Tobacco and fatty meats are seen as a path to health and well-being, and the citizens of Morrilton are no more mindful of their health and safety than any company shelling these products out in the era they idolize were. Another example of their ignorance and backwards morals is the fact that the town is sequestered by race, each section lovingly referred to as Soul Food Town or China Food Town. Even their school mascot is racially charged, the Fighting Vanishing American. And of course, the white Protestants of Morrilton are seen as the people who were made in God's image, and God's chosen people aren't above setting or defending the boundary lines of color when they need to. All this repression and moral grandstanding does nothing more than stifle the true nature of Morrilton citizens. And every single person in Morrilton, while they do certainly adhere to and believe in their faith to a certain degree, is only keeping up the status quo for appearances. And rather than doing these citizens good, it's causing them quite a lot of harm. And no one is more representative of this idea than the subject of our video, Clay Puffington. Clay Puffington is everything wrong with Morrilton packaged into one person, and considering he's the chosen leader of this evangelical hellhole, that's quite fitting. Born in Morrilton and raised in a righteously religious household just like all its citizens, Clay was a child who had nearly the same temperament as his son Oral, and he appeared to be relatively innocent and trusting. He was intensely close to his mother, a woman who suffered 10 miscarriages due to her excessive smoking, drinking, and physical activity during her pregnancies. Because of these experiences, she coddled Clay and spoiled him rotten to the point that he even developed an Oedipus complex, and her babying naturally caused him to be inherently selfish, a trait that he would carry on into adulthood, along with the religious fundamentalism she imparted upon her son. Clay might have had at least one level-headed, albeit jaded parent, his father, a man who was unhappy with his son's development into an overly nurtured mama's boy, a man who was spurned by his wife, because she focused solely on their son due to the trauma she suffered from her miscarriages. Though the idea that Arthur was a somewhat decent father only rings true prior to the death of his wife. After Clay learns of his mother's miscarriages, he decides to play a prank on her by faking his suicide, and he did this because he thought he'd lost some of his mother's attention, and so he sought to regain it by playing with her emotions. And because he did, his mother suffered a heart attack. This drove an even deeper wedge between Clay and his father, and if he was jaded before, that was nothing compared to what Arthur Puppington felt now. Because of his mother's death, and the subsequent scorn of his father, Clay's desire for attention translated to the pursuit of his father's punishment so he could receive any kind of emotion out of him. Their relationship would only deteriorate as this continued though, and the petulant and self-absorbed Clay was essentially abandoned by his father. Now, because his mother was the primary influence in his life, Clay developed into a man that echoed the values she instilled in him. When Blaberta met him at Millie's wedding, Clay listed his primary hobby as reading the Bible alone at home. And while this is certainly a reflection of the values that were instilled into him, what's more important is why he says that he's only into the Bible and heaven. And that's because it lasts. When Blaberta asked Clay about his parents, he told her they were dead, even though we learn later on in the special that his father is still alive. But to Clay, his father might as well be dead, and we do know for certain that his mother is. And if Clay is all alone here as he claims, his statement that he enjoys what he enjoys because they last shows that even during this more pure time in his life, he was a cynical man, a man who experienced losing the unconditional love of his mother and the scorn of his father, a young man alone in the world who can't stand the impermanence of mortal life and looks only towards eternal life in the presence of God. While this is quite a sad existence, it is a harmless one, and if Clay Puppington had continued to live his life in this way, he might have caused harm to nobody but himself. But Clay's destiny was to be molded by others into a man he never should have been, and just as his mother harmed his development into an adult, Blaberta continues her legacy by doing much the same in Clay's adulthood. Due to her loneliness and insecurities regarding her own usefulness, Blaberta sought to mold Clay into the husband she always wanted. And in order to do that, she introduced Clay to alcohol. Once she did, Clay came out of his shell. And though this causes Clay to relax and let go of his inhibitions in this moment, introducing him to alcohol and strong-arming him into changing and getting married was possibly the worst thing for Clay, as not only has his inherent selfishness, repressed rage, grief, and self-pity that he'd been stifling with religion been unleashed, but he's now in a situation that can only make him unhappy in the long run, a situation that will only exasperate those repressed feelings to an unholy degree. When we're given our first look at Clay Puppington, husband and father of two, we're shown a man who's misguided, cynical, judgmental, hypocritical, uncaring, misogynistic, abusive, emotionally distant, neglectful, and ignorant, traits which he uses to great effect in upholding the status quo of Moralton and in his rearing of his son Oral. Clay is wholly unsatisfied with his existence throughout the entire show, though like everyone else in this series, he hides it quite well for a long time. Before we get to the third season, however, where many characters reach their breaking point, Clay does still express his dissatisfaction with life in a few different ways, mostly by constantly talking about his dead-end job and complaining about his wife in every way you can imagine. Miserable is probably the single best word to describe Clay Puppington. He hates himself, and due to everything we've discussed thus far, Clay is a deeply depressed man, one who is unfortunately suicidal as well. But though it might be quite apparent why he's miserable, you have to keep in mind that Clay's childhood and he lives in a place like Moralton. Add in the fact that Clay is in the closet, and you have the perfect recipe for a man who is not at all who he wants to be. Now, someone so miserable is bound to turn to some sort of coping mechanism, and unfortunately for the rest of the world, Clay's is alcohol. Clay's goal when using alcohol is to numb himself, but he also uses it to forget that he's a husband, father, and mayor. A man who's unsatisfied with all his roles, and who has no direction, purpose, or reason to live. Now, all of whom Clay is, has led him to doing some rather nasty things, and for the majority of the show, those things typically come in the form of him having a hand in his son's commitment of some of the most heinous and deplorable crimes ever put to claymation. And if he doesn't have a hand in helping his son commit crimes, he does have a hand in causing his son to hurt himself in many ways. Though to be fair, He's certainly not alone in causing Oral to do these things, but the horrid advice he gives to his son is definitely a part of it. Unleashing a zombie apocalypse, assaulting and impregnating women with his own seed and a pastry bag, beating up 2 young boys with a baseball bat for the sake of loyalty, selling his urine as a sports drink, Oral's crack, and alcohol addiction. All these things and more are partly inspired by Clay's Moralton-derived, fear-based parenting style. But it's not until the end of season 2 that we get to see what harm that all that Clay has been through has done to his person. During the 2-part episode Nature, Clay takes his son on the traditional Puppington father-son hunting trip, and this is when the entire dynamic of Moral Oral changes. Up until this point, we've essentially been seeing this show through the eyes of a still innocent Oral, a pure child who views the corrupt nature of Moralton as virtuous and godly. And we even get a cute stop-motion film of all of Oral's exploits in the previous episode, one that shocks its adult viewers with its innocent take on their horrid exploits. But during their hunting trip, Clay makes sure that whatever wool was over his son's eyes is ripped to shreds with the cold reality of life in Moralton. Though Clay has disciplined his son numerous times at this point, he'd always done it with a smile on his face and a chip on his shoulder. The harshness of his jaded worldly advice, masked by Oral's innocence and naivete. But more importantly, Oral has never really spent too much one-on-one quality time with his father. Here it's just Clay and Oral, and during his extended exposure to his father, we're given our true introduction to the evil of Clay Puppington. Plied with alcohol as usual, and free from any societal inhibitions, Clay shows himself to be just as uncaring as he usually is. But now he's far more cruel and exceptionally brutal. He refuses to acknowledge Oral's apprehension to hunting, and he chooses to instead force the practice on him without any tenderness or thought put to the matter. In fact, after Oral fails multiple times to kill an animal, Clay becomes furious, ranting nonsensically about the animals of nature being the enemy, and he takes it upon himself to finish the job on a deer. And afterwards, Clay spitefully tells Oral that he wins and Oral loses, somehow proving to himself that killing these animals is right, and he's triumphed over his son's pacifistic ways. Shortly after, though, because he's so inebriated, Clay shoots someone's hunting dog. And even though he appears to realize this when he mounts the dog's head and labels it Tasty the dog, he still proceeds to disgust his son and us as he cooks and eats the poor thing. Now what happens next is the most despicable thing Clay Puppington does in this series. As father and son are conversing around the campfire, and Oral begins to call out how horrible of a person Clay is, Clay ends up shooting Oral in the leg. Once he does, he blames it on Oral rather than taking any responsibility for it. And when Oral advises him to reach for some disinfectant to help him out, Clay downs it instead, leaving his son to fend for himself while he lays passed out beside him. Oral is then forced to defend himself from a bear, and
So this is like, as you can see, him as a person, this Clay Puffington, he's a horrible father. I just watched only one episode of this show for the first time, and I had no idea. So, I mean, this dude, so he's always drunk. And remember, this is a fictional character, but this is just for fun looking at psychology related stuff, which I'm interested in. So, his advice in this backwards 1950s era style society they've created is so bad to Moral that Moral interprets it to mean a lot of the time some literally or in some other way, and it's just it's bad advice. And so basically he does something horrible, and I can't believe in one of the episodes they said that he did something vile to people in the town with his, I don't even want to repeat it, but yeah. So this is a fucked up ass show to be fair, and I did not know how fucked up it was, but yeah, viewer discretion advised. Sorry I didn't say it before. I didn't think it'd be that bad. I mean, no wonder the show, because I don't think this lasted long, and I could probably see why. I mean, it's just a little too extreme, but let's continue. So as his son's sitting there shot, he drinks the alcoholic disinfectant and then just passes out rather than help his son. Like uh that's how like useless he is for other people. He to where he causes them harm.
For it. And when Oral advises him to reach for some disinfectant to help him out, Clay downs it instead, leaving his son to fend for himself while he lays passed out beside him. Oral is then forced to defend himself from a bear, and then spends nearly 24 hours in agonizing pain. And when Clay wakes up and learns of his son's predicament, he first denies shooting him, then claims that it wasn't his fault even if he did, because he doesn't remember doing it. From here on out, we get to see Clay in a different and horrific light, his selfish, narcissistic, and vindictive nature on full display. He goes on a rant at the pub, decrying his pitiful life and the sad world he inhabits, shoving the gnawing feelings of self-hatred and disillusionment that he feels on all present. It's revealed that he didn't talk to his son about the shooting for 6 months, and when he was given the opportunity, he chose to veer the conversation towards his own fear of losing his position as mayor. When he discovers that his son is spending time with his coach so that he might repair his relationship with his father, he completely disregards his feelings and evolves into a hateful and sorrowful mess at the prospect of losing his relationship with Danielle. All of these things, and all that Clay Puppington is, amounts to one incredibly pathetic and dangerous individual, and the evil of Clay Puppington is found in his selfishness, self-hatred, and self-pity, all of which cause him to only think about himself and act in a way that harms people physically or emotionally. And when we ask ourselves who Clay Puppington is, we find the answer being a man who was warped and twisted by corrupted moral and religious values, a boy who experienced an unhealthy amount of trauma, coddling, and neglect that caused him to develop into a caricature of every supposed virtuous value that was drilled into him. But what really makes Clay so terrifying is that he represents something all too real. Yes, his character is an exaggeration of the damage and upbringing and adult existence that surrounded by a shifty moral structure can bring, but he is the reality that some people have had to face to a lesser, even, or more extreme degree. He's a spiteful husband whose love for his wife can be counted in dust mites. He's a father who performs his duties as a guide and mentor, callously and haphazardly. And he's a mayor upholding the values of a system that ravaged his life and warped him into a shadow of what he could have been had he not been handled so carelessly.
Dead air square, you fucking faggot. Jesus Christ.
Clay Puppington is a modern American horror, one whose evil is found in his obsession with the self. But though
God,
Clay
his internet's
Puppington is the dark
trash.
representative of a broken value system and a corrupted society, and he shouldn't be excused for any of his actions, he's a perfect example of the idea that evil is not born, it is made. Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Clay? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below.
Clay reminds me of Squizzy Pop. That's my opinion on it. Do I sound louder? How does that sound? Better? Yes, no. Do I need to go up more, down more? Am I popping? Popping. It's a popping. How about that? Yeah, let's try that. I know. It's his exact story, except I'm waiting on him to kill the Hogans. All right, Watcher, appreciate you. All right. Yeah, what a fag. I don't know. I think he's probably over here reading chat. Faggot. I just sit down at the computer and the motherfucker went live 29 seconds before I sit down at the computer. And I was like, nah, I'm sniping this bag. Where'd you go, Square? He paused the video. Where'd you go, Squizzy Pop? And I know there's other people live. I was just sniping to get this faggot. Giving y'all a milking station, as Mustard put it. Come on, Square. God damn. That's how self-aware he is, Witch. He don't even realize it's his own goddamn story. Oh, already probably. I'm sure. He's yeah. Fucking right, Witch, right? I don't know. Fucking weird. Come on, Squizzy Pop. Oh, Squizzy Pop.
In the one episode I've seen, so moral goes and hears from church, give to the poor if you know what's good for you. His father then tells him, he said, you need the value to learn the value of money, or else you'll know then that it's not just a sin to waste money, it's also insane. So he starts job working. On the way home, he sees a guy that looks like a bum, thinking, give to the poor if you know what's good for you. So they get things like, here. He's like, oh, it's crap.
Damn it. Uh, I think I'm gonna have to reset my router. Pancake. Damn it, that means that's gonna piss me off. I need to reset my router. Yeah.
A slow day. He's like, I didn't make enough scratch today. I'm jonesing. He's like, I want to return these figurines. He's like, there's no return policy. You know that. You work here. So he's like, I tried to give to the homeless and be a good person, you jerk. His dad finds out. His dad
Hey, I'm
disciplines
going
him,
to
and he's
drop
like,
off, guys. I
why did you do
apologize.
it? And he tells him why, because
I
of
got to
what
reset my
church
router.
said and what his dad taught him. And he said, oh, that guy was richer than me. He's like, well, he looked really down and out. He's like, no, that's just how people on crack look like. He's like, oh, give me the crack. He's like, I can probably sell this. He said, yeah, I paid 50 for it, but it's, he said, you probably get double that. It's really good. He's like, that's my boy. And that's what Clay Puffington says to Oral. So that tells you all it needs to know. Yeah, it's a really crazy show.
If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, to my patrons, and to anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're
I'm
seeing on
sorry about
screen now.
the being muted. Oh, crap. I don't have my comments up. Yeah. I got to remember to pull my comments up once when I switch. And Otherwise, I won't be able to see what this. Can't get my chat pulled up for some reason. It's like not loading. What the hell? Oh, there we are. All right. Hey, oh, Miss, did I stop what? You know, I didn't stop. Well, I had stopped for a second. I thought I was talking. I was muted. Sunflower Dragon, you're not supposed to be in here. Okay. So, goodbye. Take care of yourself. But we don't vibe. Alright. The one I was gonna do was not Gus. I got that wrong. It was supposed to be, if I can find him. Oh, he did one on Todd Alquist as well. I think I'll have to check out that one too. Now I'll be able to pause it more and give my thoughts to what he says that I'm inside. Where in the world is he? There he is. And if any of y'all ever originally saw this movie, you know that in that one scene where he pretends to have a cast on his arm and is injured, that came straight from Ted Bundy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 119th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Jane Buffalo Bill Gum from The Silence of the Lambs. One of two remaining Lecter series villains I haven't covered yet. James is a man lost himself, one whose desire to find purpose and meaning in his life transforms him into a skin-hunting monster preying on the young and innocent, a man who terrifies us with his disturbing presence and gruesome desires.
Yeah, so this guy apparently had, they were believed that he had tried to Lecter had told this one thing. Lecter had told Clarice, look at Johns Hopkins. He said there's these many hospitals that do gender reassignment surgery, Johns Hopkins, and he said I wouldn't be surprised if our Billy is applied for and been denied at all of them. And and she was like, what basis would they deny on him on? He said, look for strong psychological trauma and other maladies. He said something about our young Billy wasn't born a killer. He became that way. Basically, he went through trauma, and instead of it turning it into him getting past his developmental issues along with the trauma that he experienced, he used it to form a hatred and didn't like who he was. He didn't accept who his identity was. And so, therefore, that is why he seeks the skin. Like, his idea is to create the most perfect, like, almost like a dress or getup that he can wear that is skin that he considers beautiful, that he wants to be his. And that there's one scene, if y'all remember watching this movie, where he dances and does some of that weird crap, and like, if you remember what I'm talking about, he dances and imagine like he's a woman. That is so Lecter knew who, kind of already knew, but he was leaving like little breadcrumbs for Clarice to eventually get enough information to where she could nab search and eventually profiling to a degree. So when she encountered him and seen that moth, she knew it was him.
In this video, we'll first explore much of the background information that can be found about James in the book that's left out of the film. Then we'll move on to discuss how this information caused James to become the man he is during his time as a serial killer. I'd like to note that the film's timeline is slightly different from the books, and because most of the background information we're given about James is found in the book, I'll be using the dates that were given there rather than in the film. Now, without further ado, let's begin. James Gum, whose first name is the result of an uncorrected clerical error on his birth certificate, was born on October 25, 1949, to an unnamed woman who was carrying him when she failed to place in the Miss Sacramento contest in 1948. James' father is never mentioned. When his mother's acting career failed to materialize, she went into an alcoholic decline, and James was placed in a foster home when he was only 2 years old. James' grandparents retrieved him from an unsatisfactory foster home when he was 10, and for unknown reasons, he killed them 2 years later. Now, this could indicate one of two things, or a combination of both. The first is that James' grandparents mistreated and abused him, and so he decided to kill them. Or, James was a child who was mistreated and abused in the various foster homes he spent time in, which unfortunately is not uncommon, and he was hardened by his experiences there. So, in regard to his grandparents' murder, either James was vindictive, sadistic, or perhaps both. However, we'll never really know the truth of the matter. What is clear, though, is that James suffers from antisocial personality disorder, and his future twisted endeavors only serve to confirm this notion. But let's continue with what little we know of his backstory before we move on to that part of his life. After the murder of his grandparents, James would be remanded to Tulare Vocational Rehabilitation, where he was taught to be a tailor during his years at this psychiatric hospital, demonstrating a definite.
Oh, that's also right. I'm sorry. So I didn't mention that. He worked at a psychiatric hospital, of all places, and that's where he learned how to sew. Was he made a tailor, like he just said.
Aptitude for the work. In 1966, at the age of 18, Tulare closed, and from there, James' life becomes shrouded in mystery. We know that he worked in at least 2 restaurants off the books, and he worked sporadically in the clothing business. According to Benjamin Raspail, who had been his lover, James had flayed and killed people prior to.
And if you remember Dr. Lecter saying Benjamin Riceville, that was a patient of Benjamin. And that's how he knew about Buffalo Bill, but he wasn't going to just straight up tell Clarice. So, see, Benjamin Rasfel was a player in the Baltimore Philharmonic Orchestra, and he was a patient, and, Lecter killed him.
He's slowing
meeting him.
down.
Know that he worked in at least closed, and from there, James' life becomes shrouded in mystery. We know that he worked in at least 2 restaurants off the books, and he worked sporadically in the clothing business. According to Benjamin Raspail, who had been his lover, James had flayed and killed people prior to meeting him, and he also beheaded and flayed his new lover Klaus after Benjamin broke up with James, even going so far as to make an apron from his skin, which indicates that the murder of his grandparents wasn't a one-off thing, and it was a moment that he wanted to replicate elsewhere for either financial or sadistic reasons. But it was in the mid-1970s when he was working at a curio store that everything would change for James. After being fired from this store, and as Benjamin put it, doing the bad thing to some, quote, luckless bad person, the bad thing assumedly being murder, James was in a state of despair and went by the post office to pick up his former employer's mail, hoping to find something to sell to help sustain himself. But upon opening up one of the stolen packages, he found only more despair in the form of worthless butterfly remains. Hands coated in the multicolored powder of dozens of butterflies, James, hollow and broken, sat crying on his bed lamenting his position in the world. But in the throes of sadness, he heard a noise emanating from the suitcase he had just rifled through, a butterfly emerging from its cocoon. James watched as it pumped its wings and fluttered out a window he had opened for it. And in that moment, he claimed that he felt so light and that he now knew what to do. This realization was that he himself needed to undergo his own metamorphic transformation to.
Yeah, so he hated not just his life and his position, but that he wasn't a woman, that he had been dumped. Like Lecter talks about Benjamin, his patient, and them being lovers and all that in the movie.
to break free from the cocoon that he had been trapped in his entire life and transition into what he was meant to be, a woman. In his pursuit of this path, James would apply 3 times to Johns Hopkins for gender reassignment surgery under the name John Grant due to his criminal past, and each time he was rejected after he failed a number of the psychological tests that were required by Johns Hopkins at this point in time. After the 3rd time, James roughed up a doctor before resigning himself to the idea that he would never be granted a chance to undergo this procedure, and from here on out, James' prospects of becoming a woman seemed grim. However, James felt that his transition into a woman was more than a necessity for him. It was his destiny, and it was around the year 1982 that he resolved himself to ensure that destiny would be realized by formulating this twisted plan to make a suit for himself made of human female skin, so he could masquerade as a woman as best he felt he could, without actually transitioning. During the same period that James worked at the curio store, he had begun working at the fittingly named Mr. Hyde Leather Goods in Calumet City just outside of Chicago, and it was during his time as an employee at Mr. Hyde that he was fortunate enough to meet one Mrs. Lipman, a woman who owned her own alteration business that she ran from her home, a home that was actually a massive building with an empty storefront and complex basement that contained many hidden warrens and alcoves throughout its vast expanse.
Du meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingesetzt bin.
I think he's muted and he don't know it. Somebody in the chat just said no sound. Yeah, don't judge me too harshly, Artie. I thought it was funny.
And siphoning.
I can't believe I just did that shit again.
Nah, he's fucked up.
God dang, man. It's a button. Make sure you press the button. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. So basically with James, the reason why you basically have someone that's got antisocial personality disorder with gender dysphoria that doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin, so they seek out the skins of others. They were rejected by their parents, their foster parents, society, the people they had emotions to, his lovers and stuff, and different ones. Didn't everything. He operated in such a way they never thought someone like Clarice would come off it. Catherine was meant to be his final victim. It didn't matter if they were offering him money or anything like that. Like, he was never going to return her because she was, I believe, intended to be his last one, and then his suit would finally been made, which is why he made sure to have her apply lotion and all that other deranged stuff. The thing that tricked him up is that he didn't ever, see that Dr. Lecter being, and if he did, that Dr. Lecter would then, happen upon an FBI agent at the time that would be into the case. Like, that's literally, how he got caught. Because because he was acting funny when he was being questioned. The butterfly in one of his victims' mouth. He probably did that to symbolize his change or whatever, you know, and that was a direct like bingo moment when she seen that moth in his in the house.
In her home for himself. And it was after her retirement that he took a trip with her to Florida, where he presumably killed her and orchestrated his inheritance of her estate. But the reason that I mentioned earlier that James likely formulated his plan to make a skin suit for himself in 1982 is because that's when he met Frederica Bimmel, the overweight woman who had begun to make alterations for Mrs. Lippman during the last year of her life. James befriended Frederica and entered into a sexual relationship with her. And from what we know of this process, we can assume that James actually formulated his plan because of his contact with Frederica, a woman whose body he was intimately familiar with, and thus inspired by. However, James wouldn't murder Frederica right away. Instead, he would murder several other women and use their bodies to create tableau, art featuring models or motionless figures representing a scene, and he perhaps used this art to model his future look, sealing off the rooms he had created this art in once he had finished admiring his ghastly work. However, James eventually deemed this a waste of material and finally began his plan to create his new body when he murdered Frederica in 1983. Now that we've gone over who James was as a child and how he arrived at the point we see him at during the events of this story, it's time we use this information to talk about why all of what James has experienced brings him to the point where he believes himself to be suffering from gender dysphoria and needs to solve that problem by creating a set of human skin for himself. With the knowledge that James murdered and maimed people prior to his ascension to serial killer, we're able to establish that James has more or less been a monster since he was 12 years old. And not only that, but that he was likely made into the monster he was through years of abuse and mistreatment. And because of this, he unfortunately developed antisocial personality disorder as a result. What's interesting to note here about his upbringing is that between foster homes, a brief stint with his grandparents whom he murdered, and teenage years spent in a psychiatric hospital, James never had a real home. And thus, he never had any semblance of a stable life with positive role models or any real direction given to him. So, outside of learning to be a tailor at the hospital, James never really formed an identity for himself. And that's exactly how he comes to the point of believing himself to be transgender in this story. Now, what's interesting about James is that throughout this story, we're told by two different sources that James isn't actually what he thinks he is. Once from Benjamin Raspail when he claims that he wasn't really gay and that he just picked it up from jail. And again when Dr. Lecter claims that James wasn't really transgender, he merely thought he was. Initially, this seems far-fetched, as when a person feels that they're gay or transgender, it's not a choice they've made, it's who they are. So to claim that James is merely pretending to be these things would normally be a huge disservice to him as a person. However, in his case, it's not so much that Benjamin and Dr. Lecter are claiming these things because they're homophobic or transphobic and don't believe he is because of any unfortunate bias. In this case, what they're actually claiming he isn't doesn't matter here because you could replace gay and transgender with anything else and their statements would still be true. When Dr. Lecter is speaking to Clarice about this, he says, Billy's not a transsexual, Clarice, but he thinks he is. He tries to be. He's tried to be a lot of things, I expect. This line of thinking ties back into his aforementioned lack of identity, as James has lived his entire life with a void inside him where a personality would be, and so he's tried to fill that void by assimilating himself into whichever environment he's found himself in, no matter if that environment is contrary to who he actually is and what he really wants to be. And James is always at war with the choices he makes in this regard because he has no idea who he really is.
So he's got somewhat of an also like personality or dissociative identity. He's got some type of identity issue.
And it's even
personality problem.
Implied in the film that his journey to find himself sent him into the arms of neo-Nazis, as there are swastikas embroidered on a blanket in his home and even a propaganda poster on his wall. And if that isn't an indicator of a confused man jumping between vastly different areas of human experience to find himself in the wrong place, I don't know what is. As Dr. Lecter so expertly puts it, James does not murder for the sake of it. He does so because he covets. And when he can't have what he covets, or when he obtains it, and it doesn't turn out to be what he thought it would be, he turns to violence. However, there's another element to James' decision to become a woman that I haven't mentioned yet. His obsession with 2 videotapes he has of his mother in her prime. One of these tapes turns out to not contain his mother, but James was never aware of that fact, so it doesn't matter. What does matter is that in the book, we learn that James is in possession of a tape of his mother at the Miss Sacramento pageant that I mentioned earlier, and another tape of who he thinks is his mother, and another group of women gallivanting naked at a pool party. Probably around the time that James decided to transform himself. He also began a daily ritual wherein he would pamper himself following a shower, and then watch both of these tapes of his mother to better visualize his target appearance. But why does James choose to use his mother as a template for his own appearance? The answer to that is given to us in the thought we're given in reference to the second tape after we see him watching these tapes, and I quote, "Even if he couldn't see her face, Mr. Gum knew in his heart it was Mom." Filmed after the last time in his life that he ever got to really see her. This is critical, as it implies that James has memories of his mother, and considering that they were likely positive memories of her, I'm sure this makes James' mother the only truly positive person in his childhood, and in his memories of that time. So, with that in mind, it makes sense that James would endeavor to be like his mother, to become a woman to embody not just her beauty, which he sorely lacked in his dreary world, but to regain the positive feelings he had when the world was much simpler and his mother was in his life. Though he could simply be referring to himself as such because he babies his dog, he also refers to himself as Mommy when he's watching these tapes, stating to Precious that Mommy is going to be so beautiful, another indicator that James is trying to become his mother in a sense. And this is how we get the monster known as Buffalo Bill, a man who's creepy, sadistic, and depraved, a man who wails at his screaming victims to mock them, a man who creates art from the remains of women he hunted in his basement like animals in the field, a man who coveted that which he could never find, a life worth living. Because when it comes down to it, this is the tragedy of James Gum, coveting a normal life. He wanted to fit in, to be someone a mother could be proud of, and the only way he knew how to express his feelings of emptiness and longing was to try and become something he wasn't, to fill the void in his soul with self-depreciating labels and barbaric imitations. It can't be said that James was totally lost to cruelty though, as it's clear that on some level, James had empathy and compassion for others, for if he didn't force himself to view his victims as objects, he couldn't follow through with his dark desires, which is a rarity in a man whose kill count might well be more than 20 high. In the end, though, James could not overcome what he had become, and no tender feelings for his fellow man could reverse the damage that had been done to him and that he inflicted upon himself. And he fittingly met his demise while struck with admiration for the beauty of Clarice Starling, coveting that which he could not have, to his very last, his dying words in the novel coming in the form of one painstaking question: how does it feel to be so beautiful? And at this end, who was James Gum? He was a man who brought death and misery to not just the women he killed in pursuit of
So let me get it off
a new
that.
identity, but many other.
Yeah, I'll get it off that close up. So he may have had one, if not all, those mental issues. He definitely had an identity crisis continuing throughout his life. He murdered maybe upwards to at least 20, maybe more than that, people. All because in the pursuit that he could never feel satisfied. He didn't feel beautiful, enough. He rejected by everybody. It just goes to show, like, now when stuff like that happens to people, does it always end up something like this? No, but uh, in every so often, a personality, if they go through things like this, is traumatic and stuff that it's written to be and fictionalized. Keep that in mind, but it could be real in a sense. If it was, just imagine then if the environment and the genes are just the right way, apparently from what everything is known about, then it could very well be that a person develops into an antisocial individual. Whether they go on to harm people or become a murderer is probably secondary, depending upon what they end up choosing to do. Because even though he's gone through all this, that's not to say he doesn't have choice. He chose to pursue and to covet, just like Dr. Lecker says he covets, and he chose to, go after and basically kill people not that just were just close to him, but randomly, like when he found oh, I forgot the name. Catherine Martin.
Others during the course of his life, ending lives in an attempt to find meaning in his own. The life of James Gum is sad and horrifying, and his actions are beyond inexcusable. But we must never forget that James' story of
Completely inexcusable. And the obsession with the boss thing is just weird.
horror originates with his own experiences with it, and that a person
Shows you the guy that wrote these novels wasn't bad
like him is
at writing good fiction.
rarely ever just an anomaly rearing its head in a pristine world, but rather they are a byproduct of a world filled with injustice. And James, like many of his murderous compatriots, was made, not born the way he was. And it was this evil that created a greater one. And it was this darkness in others that created a greater darkness in James Gum, a man who sowed evil into the fabric of the world wherever he went. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on James? Did I miss anything? Let me
Wait,
know.
no sound? No sound? Why does it do that? Thank you, Pitbull. Thank you. I finally saw it. I don't understand why it's got no sound. Huh.
Down below and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, to my patrons, and to anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank. And a most vile thank you to
We
those
got sound now.
Oh, if he's
names
watching
you're
this
seeing
shit,
on
I'm gonna
screen
end it.
now.
I'm fucking over it. I'm going to bed. Fuck all this.
Yeah, shout out to the Vile I
And
was in part for a while.
yeah,
Matter of fact, I'm probably in some of the early videos mentioned in my old name, but
this fag right here is putting me to sleep. It's been an hour and 10 minutes.
Alquist. Now this is short, but I imagine he does a good.
He's gonna end up watching the. Yeah, he's dumb as fuck. He's gonna end up watching this bullshit. Hang on. He's gonna end up watching this bullshit until he passes out because he's a faggot. And fuck. And I'm over it. I've been alive for an hour 12. I got most of it from the beginning, anyways. So yeah. I will, Witch. I will. All right, y'all. Y'all have a good one. I'm out like a fat kid in dodgeball.